Welcome to Appointing the Wise, a podcast where we discuss local politics, government, and philosophy so we can be wise and appoint wise men and women to be our representatives in government. And a special thanks to Matt Hutchings and Mace Technology for letting us use their facilities to record today. All right, welcome to the podcast. Today I've got Rob Bishop on, and welcome to the show, Rob. Thanks so much for joining us.
No, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Rob, you're running for one of the House seats here in Utah. Is that right?
State House, it's District 6.
District 6. All right. So, and then quite a history in politics already. Obviously, you were on the Utah House of Representatives. Now, let's see, House of Representatives in Washington, D.C., representing Utah for 20 plus years?
Close. It was 18 years.
18 years. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you were a teacher prior to that, a history teacher.
Yes.
All right. And then I just want you to introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself if you want to dig into any of that.
Well, I was actually raised in Kaysville, so I've been in Utah all of my life. To a family that was involved in politics, which I think that's one of the areas you're going to go into and how I got started.
Yeah.
It was because my father was mayor when I was born. He was always a state delegate. I remember him sitting at the kitchen table making phone calls for other candidates all the time. I thought every family did that. So it was probably by the time I got in high school that I realized that we were the abnormal family, that's not the way most people did. But I was involved in college Republicans, young Republicans, in the state legislature. I was the second youngest legislator ever elected. After I quit as Speaker of the House, I spent 8 years before I ran for Congress, but half of that I was the state party chairman. Okay. And then I was in Congress for 18 years before I retired again.
And now you're coming back.
Now I'd like to do one more time if there's a little bit of poetry to it, in like having the ending of my career where I started it in the state legislature.
Okay.
Which would be nice. But I'm also interested especially in the representation, the voices that are representing Northern Utah. Because from the first time I was there, as well as today, we have the speaker from Weber County, the majority leaders from Cache, but they still are out drowned by voices from Salt Lake and Utah County. Mm-hmm. So the one thing I really want to do when I go back there is to be able to be a loud and aggressive voice for Northern Utah, especially for Box Elder and Weber, because both of those are part of this particular district, but for the entire counties and for Northern Utah to support them. And I hope it'll be easier. Everybody, when they go down to the legislature as a new one, you take 2 or 3 terms just to learn what's going on and how to be effective. I've been there. I've done that. So I really think I can term limit myself because I can go down there from the very beginning and have that effective voice. So
there's an efficiency there.
I think
with
it is.
Experience, at least.
I think it can happen. So I've told people there will be absolutely no more than 3 terms.
Yeah.
For a whole lot of different reasons.
That's 6 years, right?
Yeah. And more likely shorter than that.
Okay.
But I want to go down there to do some specific things to make sure that Northern Utah is not going to be overwhelmed by the interests of Salt Lake and Utah counties.
Okay. I think that's worth probably going into a little bit further. What do you have in mind? What interests specifically do you see? I don't know if conflict's the right word, but between the interests of the rest of us and then there's Salt Lake.
Well, it's always been there. I remember when I was first elected, Cap Ferry was our state senator and he was the Senate president. And he always told me that if you put a quarter on its side, anywhere in the state of Utah, it will roll to Salt Lake. It happens that way. There are some things that for example, in the Utah Transit Authority, we have been paying a sales tax in Box Elder County for several decades now to get the light rail or UTA up to Box Elder County. We're not even close. They barely finished the right-of-way purchases, but they've been sitting on that money for a long time.
Talking about the front runner?
Yeah.
Okay.
Coming up here.
So we've probably paid for it. Is that what I'm hearing? As far as
several times,
the constituents who are having their taxes sent to
Yeah. And I remember, UTA came to lobby me in Washington, and they would tell me how great UTA was and what it was doing for Draper with the new lines they went into Draper. And I finally had to say, you guys, you realize I don't represent Draper and don't really care about Draper.
Right.
And I have been paying you taxes for a long, long time to get it up to Brigham City. Why don't you talk about northern Utah? Same thing we have with water issues that are extremely significant and important.
Right.
I think I have been trying to help with the Bear River Water District. It's also Pine View. My house is still one of the last houses on the Pine View line. The kind of water that comes through Pine View coming out of Ogden Canyon, it splits south under covered viaducts and covered canals to go to South Ogden and South Ogden, but coming up here to northern Utah through both parts of Pleasant View as well as Willard and Perry and up to Brigham City. A lot of those canals are uncovered. Some of them are 100 years old. It's one landslide away from having catastrophe hit in the houses. Those lines are owned by the federal government, but the federal government doesn't maintain them or doesn't improve them. That's up to the rest of us to do it.
The federal government?
Yeah.
Wow.
So the federal government owns Pine View. They don't maintain Pine View, and they don't maintain the canal system. So those are some of the things that I think I'm interested in. I'm also interested in, obviously, in education. I think the legislature has done a marvelous job in increasing compensation, but not necessarily in the management of it. So they once did for both public schools and charter schools, and somewhat for private schools, but not as much. Tried to have the state board to come up with a list of all the reports that are due, that are required by them from these institutions, and they couldn't do it. They quit trying to count after 200. So there is a management top heaviness to our system.
So many reports that they can't actually sift through the data.
They don't know how many they actually require.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, that's how bad it is. But it requires administrative personnel. And if you're in a charter school, and I'm involved in one of those charter schools as a board member, it requires personnel to actually fill out the forms. So we have done a great job, I think, with education funding in the state of Utah, but not necessarily with allowing freedom to be exercised in the schools as far as how they manage themselves, how teachers are able to teach, give them some creativity, some freedom to do that, as well as having parents involved in what the process is. So there's those types of things that I want to get involved in. And I am worried about if the goal is to increase the Great Salt Lake,
get the water level back up.
The last kind of undeveloped water system is up here in northern Utah. And there are a lot of voices that are saying, forget northern Utah, send the water into the lake so that Salt Lake feels better about themselves. There's some of those things that really bother me. And I want to make sure that we have some voices that defend this area.
Yeah, that was one thing that kind of came up in my interview with Tom Peterson is how, we humans obviously impact the water in this area. How much control do we have over that? Or how much control outside of the number of mouths that are consuming it or the lawns or whatever, outside of at controlling what the people do, how much control do we have outside of that besides making it just kind of a centrally planned situation?
Conservation can help in the Great Salt Lake.
Okay.
But it's not going to solve the problem. Rain and snow is the only thing that will solve the problem. And we really can't control that. So you could take water from other sources and put in there. You could stop the growth of Salt Lake County, and that would have the same impact as putting water in there. So it is not an easy solution. I think the guy we have in charge of the Great Salt Lake, whose name just escaped me, and I was thinking it was coming while I was talking about him. Good guy. He knows what he is doing. He recognizes the difficulty that's taking place. They've done some great things in getting some unused water rights in Utah and Salt Lake County that are flowing there, taking over AMAX, getting those water rights, putting back in the Great Salt Lake. But that doesn't solve the problem. Ultimately, it's the weather that's got to solve the problem, or we have some really tough decisions on who does not get water? What do we really do with growth? Do we encourage more growth or do we not encourage growth?
Yeah, because that's kind of the drum I've been banging since I started the podcast, even talking about Brigham City and the growth here. And it seems that we can't have infinity growth as far as more people coming and more load on the water system. And that's my, I guess, my bias is towards, figuring out how to slow, we can't let everybody in type of a thing. But I don't know enough about all the other stuff. I just kind of a NIMBY myself, and so I don't know what that looks like. So it sounds like I have a right idea there. There's probably other stuff involved, conservation things we can do, and really it's going to be a matter of wise men, hopefully wise men, having difficult conversations about how things are going to be handled, and hopefully not majority shoving things down the throat of the minority. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're saying it nicely. I said I don't want Salt Lake telling us what to do. There are some areas, and northern Utah still does have the resources for growth. There are some areas that do not have the resources for growth. There are some areas that have plans for changing those resources, like St. George in Washington County. If they can get a pipeline that goes from basically the Colorado River over, then they will have the resources they need. But right now, they are really maxed as much as they possibly can. So, and there are some areas that are maxed out right now. So it depends on not necessarily what you want to do, but where you're going to place your priorities. Are you going to place priorities in developing in X and then take the resources from Y? Or do you put your priorities in having Y expand and grow and then limit what's happening in X? And that's the job for the legislature, and that's where I want Utah's and northern Utah's voice to be actually heard.
Okay. So we're not getting trampled by, got it, from Salt Lake County. And what was the other county? Utah County?
Utah. Those are the two largest counties.
The two largest.
They're the ones that are driving much of the debate right now.
In terms of population or just
population?
Okay.
But then I hate to say this, it always was the first time I went down there, Salt Lake County was driving the debate as well because that was the most populous county.
Right. Just part of the history of Utah. Right. Okay. And then let's see here. We talked about history teacher. I did want to bring this up. I was able to get your book. I'll probably try to get it signed by you. Things I Learned in Congress They Never Taught in School by Rob Bishop. And so I did want to kind of go over a little bit. If you want to give the gist of that or go into that as much as you want, what I've read, and you kind of mentioned this to me already, is that the first part of it, I really enjoyed. It's the theory. It's the things that you learn just by reading the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, some of the founders, and how things are supposed to work. And I haven't finished it yet, getting into the way things really work. And you can tell me if this was your experience. The gist I got depressed me a little bit, but maybe you can provide some clarity on whether I should be depressed about how things actually work compared to the way that I was taught in high school.
Don't be terribly depressed.
Okay.
But there are some changes that should be included in there. Why I actually wrote the book is I had taught, 28 years in public schools. And at the end, I was teaching AP Government, AP History, had some excellent textbooks. I had done everything I thought I could to prepare for those units on Congress. Mm-hmm. When I went back to Congress, I realized that everything that was in the textbooks were basically wrong. So I felt compelled to write down the situations that I experienced and vis-a-vis what it was supposed to be like. And so I had some nice long trips. I never moved from Brigham City. So every weekend I came back out here and then went back to Washington. So I had a lot of time to both.
Sorry, how often was that? Say that again.
Weekly.
Wow, that's a commute. Keep going.
Yeah, every once in a while I would stay back there occasionally, and at least the Capitol Hill ward got to know who I was, so I didn't have to introduce myself every time I went there. But it gave me, 8 hours a week to look at the letters that I was getting from people and look at the responses. Actually, my interns wrote the responses, and then I went over them on the flights back and to and from. Okay. In fact, my staff put them in folders that said, that letters to be graded. So I was still doing essay tests all the time I was there. I did a lot of reading, and then I would sit down and I would write down the experiences I had that I thought were unique.
Like journaling, basically.
Yeah, but on a laptop. And that's what this came from. The beginning, the 4 chapters of philosophy of government are really what I believe is the philosophy, the kind of moral headlights I took into the situation. Mm-hmm. And that's what the editor wanted at first. Okay. And then starting in chapter 5 is when I go through the things that we were doing in Washington, just so you knew what it was and how those happened. And then at the end of it, just some personal experience of what it was like living in D.C.
Okay. So what are some examples that maybe, 2 or 3 your favorite examples of like, this was eye-opening. This is, I think the way you mentioned it is what I would have liked to have known when I was teaching my students about the real world.
There's a whole lot of that about how committees operate that is important. I will tell you, though, there are 2 things that happen in Washington that I think are terrible. And those 2 things I think need to be changed. Okay. So in the House, the biggest problem is no one listens. So I don't know if you've ever gone down there, but if you actually walk into the House and sit in the gallery and you listen to the debate, there's maybe 4 or 5 people at max, usually 3, besides the speaker. And as I was a speaker pro tem sitting in for the speaker, I would listen to the speeches that were given, and they were marvelous speeches, all towards the C-SPAN audience. But they were marvelous speeches. There was just no one to hear them. So there's a line that they asked Huey Long when he was a senator from Louisiana during the Depression. He went to Washington, and he came back, and he said, does all the talking in Washington bother you? And Huey's response was, no, the talking doesn't bother me. It's the listening that bores the hell out of me. And that's basically what happens there, because there's a lot of talking, but there is no listening. It is designed that way because of one thing, which is called rolled votes. In Utah, in the legislature, which is far better than Congress.
People listen to each other here, it sounds like.
Well, yeah. They are expected to be in committees at the same time, and they hear one another. They're expected to be on the floor at the same time, and they listen to one another. There is a flow of debate. Back in Washington, there is no flow of debate because they're not expected to be on the floor or committees. They roll votes until a time certain to make things more convenient for people. So, like you say, like at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we will have 17 votes in a row. They have all been debated, allegedly, in the House beforehand.
Someone spoke about something.
Yes, but no one was there to hear them. And those it's sad because those speeches were wonderful. It was just, there was no clash. There was no continuity with it.
This is a tree falls in the forest, nobody hears it kind of a thing. It's like if you have this great orator and nobody listens, it's like, what good was it?
Yeah, the cliche back in Washington is everything has been said, it's just not everyone has said it. That doesn't happen in Utah because you listen to it and you respond to the debate. The debate actually grows along with it, which is why the Utah system is so much better.
And minds are potentially changed or influenced by the thoughts and ideas that are coming out of the speakers.
But it doesn't happen in Washington. When I was committee chairman in Washington, my resource committee, we voted in real time, which meant that I promised them we would have 2 hours to discuss and vote on bills. I promised them we would vote as soon as somebody proposed an amendment, we would talk about it and then vote directly upon it. So I said, be there for those 2 hours and I won't hold you afterwards. But for 2 hours, they would hear the debate and then vote on it. Now, I don't know if the votes were any better.
Yeah, if they actually changed their vote.
But at least they heard why they were doing it.
And hopefully the conscience tore at them a little bit.
I would hope so. In most committees, they just have the debate. There was one committee where I was the only Republican there, and I was outnumbered because there were 2 Democrats. And we were debating a mining law, which I found the debate between the 3 of us fascinating. And we went into a great deal of detail. And then we rolled the votes. And so after we had talked about the bill, then the other 60 members came and took their places.
After their lunch or their nap or whatever it was.
Well, I
Working probably.
actually, I don't want to throw them under the bus. Yeah, they are working.
Yeah.
There is always enough to do.
They're writing their speech for nobody else to listen to later.
And, well, that's true. And if they're actually not in a committee, chances are they're meeting with constituents, which is something else that they should be doing. So I don't want to say they're lazy. It's not true.
Right.
It's just they're ignorant. They haven't heard what the discussion is. So that's the first. On our side, it's rolled votes. What I would do is get rid of rolled votes.
You say our side. Are you talking
the House?
The House. Okay. Not
the House should get rid of rolled votes and just vote in real time. And I think then people would actually be there. Because the one thing members do care about is that their voting record is up there. They don't want people to say you're missing too many votes. So they care about being there.
They'd be there. Okay.
If the voting, you didn't know when it was, it's not going to be at 3:00 this afternoon, then you better be there to listen so that you know when the vote will take place. And it would be more like the way the Utah legislature operates.
Okay.
So that's the first reform that should take place, I think, in the House.
Before we move on to the next one, how would you practically get that to happen? That would have to essentially be passed by the legislature, which is the problem in the first place, no? Or could you alter the rules in some committee or something?
No. When I was chairman of the resource committee, we did it that way, just because I said we're going to do it that way.
I'm in charge.
Yes. The speaker could insist on that.
Okay.
Now, the speaker would need to talk to everybody so they know how they're going to change the game. This is the way it used to be. People, when Congress was originally established, would go to Congress just to listen to the debate. Some for entertainment, others. So a representative from New York always talked about how he would go into the House chamber early in the day of the debate so he could hear the debate, and the debate would actually inform his opinion. He could change his mind listening to debate. Henry Clay was originally a senator, got bored in the Senate for obvious reasons, because senators are boring, and he would come to the House just to listen to the debate.
Okay.
It was the least boring House of the session. So that's the way it used to be.
Okay.
Until we decided to become efficient by saying, all right, we'll not make you keep walking over here for votes. We'll just set the votes at a specific time and place, and then you don't have to be there. So it is a mindset. It's a culture. The Utah legislature, you are expected to be there. It's the mindset. It's the culture. That's what you do. Congress, that's not what you do.
So this would be something up to the committee, each particular committee, or is there a rule that you could, like, is it just we're at the mercy of whoever the speaker of the committee is, or whatever that role is?
Both ways. You could pass an internal rule that just says there will be no rolled votes.
Okay.
And we'll vote in real time. Yes. Or a committee chairman could do it for his or her committee. The speaker could do it for the House as a whole. Or you could actually pass a rule to do that. It wouldn't have to be a law passed.
Okay, so this could happen in real time, hypothetically.
Internally.
If our gentleman there, or ladies or gentlemen there, said, you know what, this is a good idea. So, as you mentioned, though, excuse me, if you made that change, does that change votes, do you think, ideally? Or is that part of the problem? There's maybe a deeper rooted issue here that we could change whether we do rolled votes or not. But, you know, Bob tells Stanley, hey, this is how we're voting. And then I'm just going to put in my headphones and listen to AC/DC or something.
No one knows.
No one knows.
No one knows for sure. To be honest,
sorry,
I will say that right now, I was very fortunate. Because I had been Speaker of the House in Utah, they often had me sit in for people on the floor. So I heard a lot of the debate on the floor. That wasn't good for me. They also put me...
You were kind of required to be there anyway, so you got to hear it and got to influence your vote. So your votes were informed, at least, it sounds like.
Yes, well, that sounds arrogant, but yes, it's a matter of fact.
Well, it's a low bar when it's you show up and listen.
And some of them I did change the way I voted after having listened to some people on the floor. I don't know where I was going right there. However, the way it is now, because of the way it is right now, most people, I'm sorry. I'm back on where I was going to go.
Okay.
I also served on the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee is the one that establishes the rules for all bills that are discussed on the floor. And that meant that in the Rules Committee, we heard the bills and we heard the proposed amendments. So because I was in the Rules Committee, when I came to the floor, a vote was taken on an amendment. I had heard it already in the Rules Committee.
Okay.
But there's only 11 of us in the rules, 9 of us in the Rules Committee, not the 435 that would be actually voting in the House floor. Mm-hmm. So because of the Rules Committee, or when I was on the floor at the podium, just sitting in as the Speaker Pro Tem, I was able to hear those things. Most people, though, they don't have that opportunity. So when a bill comes for a vote on the floor, the most common thing they say is, does anyone know what this does? Mm-hmm. And you usually vote based on the reputation or the political party of the person proposing the amendment.
So it's all based on the person who proposed it. Is Bob a guy that I trust as far as whether he's going to have a good law or not? And then I'll say yes or no.
If there is an amendment up there that you don't like the person who's making the amendment, that person's on the wrong party, mm-hmm. and you vote no, and then it starts to pass, then most people start to really worry at that stage.
Oh no!
And frantically say, "What does this actually do?"
That kills me. So
yes, and those are the things that would not happen if everyone was required to be there and listen to the stuff ahead of time.
Right, and I don't know how far we're going to get into the questions I had, because this is interesting to me. I've never had an opportunity to speak to a former congressman. So, but what was I going to say? One of the issues I've heard or I've seen is that some of these laws are like ungodly in their length, as far as 1,100 pages or something. Do you actually go through all those in detail? I remember the line, I think it was Nancy Pelosi, right? You got to pass it to know what's in it, kind of a thing. Is there any, am I correct in my thinking that there are laws that are so long that it's almost impossible for anybody but the person that presented it to have read?
No one should assume that the member of Congress or the member of the Senate will read everything or should.
Okay.
That's why they have staff.
Okay. To inform that.
Yeah. Now, once again, there are ways of doing things differently here. In the Utah legislature, they have incredibly long bills. The longer the bill, the easier it is to pass, because you're not going to have time to. If you have a 1.5-page bill, mm-hmm. you can read that all the time and you know what's going on. Those are the most dangerous ones, because then people actually read it.
Yeah.
And ask questions.
That sounds ideal to me. Is there something that I'm missing there?
No, that is the way to do it. In the Utah legislature, though, what they do is everything that is proposed language that would be new is underlined, and everything that is to be repealed is lined through. So you can actually read the bill and see what it would be like in the future, as what the changes would be.
If you added this part, we took this part out. It's still 300 pages, though.
Well, most of them aren't in Utah.
Oh, in Utah. Okay, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay,
and there were some like Ray Schmutz of St. George, old guy. When I was down there early on, he would read every bill, and he would make grammar corrections to the bills. Members of the legislature don't write their bills. They're written by professional staff, so they're done properly. Mm. Ray Schmutz
There's legalities there that you have to, if you say this actually means this.
And Ray Schmutz would correct them. And he would, one time he got up and said there was an amendment because the footnote on the bill had been applied to the wrong law. Ray was phenomenal. He read
through everything. It sounds like
he did, but that was his life too.
Okay.
Most people in the legislature, that is not a big problem, and the long bills, no one has a chance to do it. But it was done by staff, and there's staff there to answer questions about it and raise concerns.
All right, and it's safe to say that the people who have those staff trust those staff to provide them with accurate information.
Yes.
Okay.
It's better in Utah.
Okay.
In Congress, we have personal staff. So on my side, I was able to hire 18 people. I never hired that many, but I had 18 people, 6 out here in Utah and 6 back there. So we had our staff that will help us supposedly go through and know those bills. Okay. There's also staff of all the committees that will help us to pinpoint problem areas in bills. So it's not like nobody looks at this anywhere.
Okay, so we've got Rob Bishop is representing us, and he may not have read every piece of everything, but he's got an army of men or women helping him read through and understand each part so they don't get one past him, and that he understands important aspects that need to possibly be amended or removed altogether. Is that accurate?
It's fairly accurate.
Okay.
It's more accurate than not accurate.
Okay.
There are still some things that can be snuck through.
Okay.
Usually when you're involving with the Senate side, the Senate runs things differently than the House does. Mm-hmm. And I have less faith in what the Senate does over on that side of it. So there are ways of actually getting something through that is not necessarily what I think is a proper way of doing things. And I'm getting myself in trouble here, aren't I?
I don't know. It's just I don't think so necessarily. I think you're saying everything that I either knew already or suspected. But that's kind of how the machine works, right? I mean, it's
You'll come to a story in the book eventually.
Okay.
And this is one where Hill Air Force Base needed a second fire station on the east side of the base, closer to the runway, so that when there are emergencies, it would be better.
Okay.
It was the first priority of the Air Force. It was up there at the top. We had funded it in the congressional budget. When that budget went for military construction, went to a conference, there was a senator from Kansas who stole that money and put it into his Air Force base in Kansas.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I thought too when I found out about it and was mad. And actually, there was nothing I could do about that. So I was complaining to the chairman of military construction on the House side and asking him, what should I do? Shall I go to the floor? Do I make a big stink about it? Do I, burn myself an effigy over on the Senate steps? Something.
But
and what he told me is,
grab your cane, and I know that's happened before.
Yeah,
that was Congress, right?
Yeah, I could be happy about it. He said, "Don't do that. I got you covered. Just don't worry about this." And I didn't really understand why. And he said, "This is one of the reasons I like being chairman of the Military Construction Committee, because I can put things through that no one will know about." And he said, "Don't worry about it. Your program was the top priority of the Air Force. Mm-hmm. The Air Force wants it."
Yeah. It'll happen.
Every military construction project we have has a budget to it. Most of them are underfunded. They have a surplus at the end of the project.
Oh, okay.
There is a surplus.
Overfunded.
Yes, overfunded. So as chairman, I can redirect that funding to your fire station.
Okay. So all these surpluses from these other programs, we're just going to kind of...
And because I can do that, no one will know about it. So don't say anything. Don't rock the boat. We'll just do it. And since the Air Force wanted it in the first place, they're not going to complain. Mm-hmm. No one's going to complain about it. He just said the first surplus went to this fire station, and it was built on time. And it was extremely significant. Now, that was one time in which the process worked for the betterment. Mm-hmm. But I'm still upset that the senator took the money away in the first place.
Yeah, that was my question would have been, so how do I get my pound of flesh from that guy?
I'm still upset that we can put things in the budget that no one knows about, and that's supposed to be a good.
Right.
That's still a problem for me.
Yeah, it's a club, right? It's a tool. Used in the right hands, it works out great. Yeah, but if it's in the wrong hands, then...
Even though we won in that situation, right. I still don't like it.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. So I don't know that we got into this part, or maybe we did. You talked about your family being in politics, and that's why you got into politics. You talked about why you're coming back to it.
Yeah.
And then...
Actually,
yeah,
getting involved, I thought I was always involved.
That was the default.
So my first election to anything was as a state delegate, and I was in college.
Delegate
to the state convention.
Okay.
And it was probably this is my cute story.
Okay.
Your viewers won't think it's cute, but this is my first involvement. I was a freshman at the U, and at that time the voting age in Utah was 21. So I was only 17. And for some reason, they got the county party got hold of my number and asked me to host the caucus in our precinct.
Okay.
Now, I grew up in Kaysville where they were always at the schools because hundreds of people would show up.
Right.
So
That was kind of a venue they could use, right?
Yeah, but I was living in Central City in Salt Lake, which is not a hotbed for political activity. I didn't know. I was expecting hundreds of people showing up. What to do? So I got all the furniture out of. It was in an old Victorian home, had half of the bottom floor. Put all the furniture out. Got folding chairs for 40, cookies and punch for 40. Was waiting for the onslaught, wondering where I'd put the overflow. 2 little old ladies from around the corner showed up. I coerced my 3 roommates into staying. That was it. And so the 2 really nice women, but they kept saying, let's just call them and say we don't have a quorum. And I didn't know a whole lot about politics at that time, but I knew that there was no such thing as a quorum in these meetings.
Okay.
So I said, why don't we just try and organize as best we can? So who'd like to be the chairman? And everyone was looking on the floor. So I said, okay, I'll be the chairman. Then who would like to be the state delegate? And they were all looking on the floor. I said, okay,
All right.
I'll do the state delegate as well. Not realizing that at 17,
You couldn't do any of it?
I was 4 years too young to vote. But no one asked, so I went away with it. I was the chairman. I was the delegate. That was my first vote, which is an illegal one. I found out later that my grandfather cast some illegal votes, so I guess it ran in the family.
Also in the family, huh?
But I knew since I was 17, I was going to quickly change and go on a mission. So I was so organized. I was amazing. I had everything in packets. I had volunteers ready to put up signs and things when they were supposed to go out, because I wasn't going to be there.
In your absence.
In my absence. I picked up a registrar. I got a place to the registrar. I got a place for the voting. I picked up 2 of the 3 judges we needed. I was set. I left. Now, when I went on my mission a long time ago, where the conference center is, before that was the Deseret Gym, but before that there was an old hotel on the corner that was the mission home.
Okay.
Which missionaries went for the first week, and then you went out in the field if it was English speaking, or went to either BYU or BYU Hawaii to learn a language for the next 7 weeks. Okay. So I was going to go. I was eventually going to end up in BYU in the language training mission, but I had that week at the mission home. I had no idea. I have no idea how the county got hold of me or tracked me down.
He's still here in Utah. We'll get him.
The second day I was in that mission home, I got a call to go into the mission president's office, who told me that my judge I had selected had died and that the county had called me. And he was going to give me 1 day to go back to my district and find a new election judge, which seriously happened. I think I do set a record in my church for being the only missionary to be released for 1 day from his mission to find an election judge.
Oh, wow.
But that is exactly what I did.
So they released you. You went and did
I went to the district, which is only about 6 or 7 blocks away. Got a new guy to be the election judge, came back there. I think I stayed in the spirit of it because the guy I got to be the new election judge, his name was Nephi McLaughlin.
Oh, perfect.
So, but that was my introduction into politics. And all of that was done before they had lowered the age to 18 and I was legal.
That's awesome. That is cool. That makes me feel better about I guess feel better about not being involved in politics as much. You look at some of these people that are like, wow, how have you done all of this? And you're younger than me, and it helped. Dad was in the business and taught you a bunch of stuff. So I didn't learn any of my dad's business. He was a mechanic. And so, And I was a knucklehead. But anyways.
You learn things that are useful to people.
Yeah. All right. So one of the questions I like to ask here, and maybe we can get into this a little bit as well. One of the questions I asked or we discussed with Representative Peterson is looking at electing somebody to go represent us in the House of Representatives. How do you view your position there? I watched a Khan Academy video about talking about how you could either see yourself as a trustee and, people vote for you and it's like, hey, we trust Rob Bishop, his experience, his philosophy, his moral bearings, him as an individual to make the right choice when the information is presented to him so that he can represent us. The alternative to that would be something more like a delegate who is more of like democracy with extra steps. And basically, we don't care what you think, Rob. We want you to vote this way because 51% of us in your district expect it, or some combination of the two. How do you feel you would represent, is it District 6? As far as that goes, what guides that, I guess?
There are a couple of things. Ideally, there should not be a difference between what the district wants and how you're voting. But there is a difference in the management of that concept. If you're just if you're just only going to vote the way your district wants you to vote, then you might as well just have a Gallup poll do everything for you.
Right. Okay.
There's no logic that goes with that. In fact, that's one of the problems with initiatives and referendums is it's just a pure vote for pure democracy's sake, and it may not be the right thing to do.
Right.
If there is one advantage I had in the legislature from just the rest of my district and in Congress from the rest of the state, it's I was given the advantage to have more information at my disposal. And therefore, a good representative of the people will actually use his own basic instincts more than relying upon simply a quick vote, a head count. How many people are saying this versus how many are saying no? Because it'll never be unanimous. A quick story. When Norm Bangerter was Speaker of the House, we had a caucus.
This is Utah or
in Utah. And we had a caucus, and people were moaning like, if we go out there and vote for this, what will our constituents say? What will the media say? Mm-hmm. And finally, he got tired of listening to all the whining, and he just stood up and said, just go out there and do the right thing, and everything else will take care of itself. And if our constituents don't like us and vote us out of office, next January, I'll feel bad about halfway to St. George. That was an attitudinal vote, which means when you vote for a representative, you vote for that person to use his judgment, his intellect, his access to information, and then allow him to vote in what he thinks is the right thing to do, whether it's popular or not, the right thing to do. And then at the next election, you have a chance whether to rehire him or fire him.
Yeah, how well do you think
or
you did?
Him or her, yeah. But really, the most important thing you can do is you need to do the thing that you think is the right thing to do. And that's an attitudinal vote. Mm-hmm. The other one is where you just succumb to simple majority, minority. That's not representative government. That's pure democracy and has all sorts of flaws to it.
Yeah. It was a pejorative term back in the day, right?
Yeah, well, it still is.
Still is. That's fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. You're like, I still agree with John Adams, and it turns out that's still the piss poor way to run the government.
The one thing I really hated, and only 2 people ever did this on me, is they came up to me and said, you have to do what I want you to do because you work for me. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I don't work for me. For you. Mm-hmm. You elected me to use my own logic and to find out the right thing to do. And then you can judge whether I did it or not and elect me or reelect me or not reelect me.
Right. How
but
closely
I am not your servant and slave, and you cannot use that crap on me. Mm-hmm. I one time I said, I was telling people, the only difference between me as an elected legislator and everybody else that surround me is I have a little bit more information that I can draw upon to make my decisions.
Okay.
And that other than that, anybody can serve in the legislative function. And I truly believe that.
So you're talking about anybody in northern Utah or in District 6 could do that job. You happen to have more information. Well, in the situation of voting on the law, you have more information on that at the time than I do, just looking at what's there.
But you have the same innate ability to make judgments if you had the same information.
Right. If I were in your shoes there with the same resources, we'd be pretty similar.
So I did that once, and then the next election, I had like 3 people file against me, so I quit making those statements. But yeah, people. That's the one thing that is great about our system of government, representative system of government, is you don't have to be trained to be a legislator. You don't have to be trained to make decisions. People can do those decisions. The only advantage you have by being there is if you have more information and data upon which to make those decisions. Mm-hmm. But the innate ability of being a representative is the thing that makes this system wonderful and makes it good. And it's the positive part about the system, is that anybody can do these jobs.
So talking about the mechanics of how things actually work, is it true then, or just in my mind I'm thinking, would it be true then you've got experience in politics generally in multiple legislatures? So you probably have come to trust your own instincts, intuition. You feel probably pretty grounded in that. Whereas somebody coming in new may not know the ropes as well and be like, well, I trust this guy who took me under his wing when I first, joined the Congress. And so maybe I'll default to what he goes with some of the time, unless I've got a really good reason. Does that happen? Does that seem like it's reality, or is that just something like you kind of thought of?
No, that is a logical question. That the issue is not about me as a candidate. It's about the constituents. Who will best represent you? Mm-hmm. Right now, because I have more experience and I have some of that data that we talked about, right now, I could be the best representative right now because I don't have to go through a learning curve.
Right. You don't have to take another two sessions to catch up to everything.
But originally, I had to go through the learning curve, and anybody else will go through that same kind of learning curve. So that's the advantage I give right now. Okay. But once again, that's not something that's innate within me. Anybody can have that particular advantage. And if I go down there, the one thing is I still don't know everything. So there is a lot of things that have changed since I was first in the legislature. A whole lot of things have changed. It still is a learning curve in understanding the document. But how to work that system, where to go, with whom to speak, how to actually introduce bills, what to do with them, when to do amendments. Mm-hmm. The procedure, I have the expertise. I still have to get more information as well. No one has it all down. There's still a lot of stuff that needs to be learned. Okay,
so in a hypothetical other district somewhere else in Utah, it's not necessarily a huge disadvantage for somebody to not have been in Congress. That's just kind of how the system works. And so they're going to have to find their feet, and hopefully they come with the confidence to trust their understanding when they're placed with that information. Like you said, you've got the experience, so that's helpful, but it's just part of how the system works. And so it's just kind of how it is.
And it's my input that if I think a person in a particular position is doing a good job, I would never challenge them. Mm-hmm. So Matt Gwynn, I thought was our representative. I thought he did a good job. I thought he was grounded. Mm-hmm. I simply wouldn't challenge him. But when he decided to quit and gave me a phone call, that's when I said, okay, I would like to spend 2 to 4 years down in the legislature, finishing everything off.
Okay.
And then I'll retire, I guess, for a 4th time.
Just keep coming back. That's awesome. Okay.
But then this time I won't come back.
Yeah, fair.
I mean, the last time I went to the legislature, I stayed for 16 years. And when I went to Congress, I stayed for 18 years. It ain't going to happen this time.
Yeah, not going to happen. Okay. Let's see here. So where do you get your moral bearings? this is kind of a two-part question, I guess. I actually, my sister made me this shirt. I've got the John Adams quote on the back of it about moral government. Yeah. And so looking at that, again, looking for a wise person to represent us at the Capitol, where do you get your moral bearings? Either did you and they're still with you, or even now?
There are different kinds. If you're talking about moral bearings for life or moral bearings of government, not necessarily the same. Very, very close, but not necessarily the same.
Okay.
I have to admit that my moral bearings for life came first from my family. They are there. From my church, that's where the basis was. I've had some great people to help me out along the way. My first chief of staff in Washington was the grandson of Ezra Taft Benson, so I knew the Benson family pretty well.
Okay.
And yeah, they had a great deal of influence on me, and he had a great deal of influence on me. When I was in the 8th grade, it's the first time I read Barry Goldwater's Conscience of a Conservative.
Okay,
which is,
that's all.
Well, yeah, it's kind of geeky for an 8th grade.
Yeah, even then, right?
And yeah, but that has been, I think, my political star. I followed Goldwater a lot. And then as I started teaching government, studying the system of government. So, for example, I always say that to me, the best founding father we ever had was Sir Isaac Newton. Even though he never lived here, he didn't talk about politics at all, and he was a scientist, and he died a half century before anyone was talking about the revolution. But he believed in that third dynamics of physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Okay.
And every founding father also believed in that. So the founders who wrote our system designed that there's no way you can make a law to make everyone good. And if you did, it would be easily broken. Madison called those parchment barriers, easily made, easily broken. But what you can do is design a government so that you had power centers in different places, and there would be a check and balance system so that no one person would become too powerful, no one cabal could become too powerful. And by having checks and balances against one another, you would save the rights of individual citizens. That's the way our system was designed. So for me, the concept of checks and balances for either state or federal government between the three branches of government is essential. But also the check and balances between the state and the nation, which we call federalism, is essential. That to me is the ideal purpose of government, that as long as those balances there, people's individual rights will be protected. If that ever gets out of balance, if ever any president makes too many executive orders, to me, that's wrong.
So we've been out of balance for a little bit then by that metric.
Since the turn of the century.
Okay.
No,
that'd be Bush, right? Is that what you mean?
Well, Trump has done a lot of executive orders.
Right.
Most of them I agree with, but I don't agree with the process of executive orders. Biden did a whole lot of executive orders. Obama, in his last 2 years, did a whole lot of executive orders. Bush did a whole lot of executive orders. Now, it didn't always used to be that way. If you go back to Kennedy, Eisenhower, Truman, they didn't do a whole lot. Woodrow Wilson and Teddy Roosevelt are the first two that started this process of executive orders.
That's where it was born, essentially, then? Is that what you mean? That was like the first one? Or they had a few before that, but this is...
We have always had executive orders.
Okay.
Washington is the first one that did it.
Okay, that's...
He did 8 in 8 years. From 1850 to 1900, there were 16 presidents. They did 140 executive orders amongst them. Teddy Roosevelt did not believe in federalism. He did over 1,000 by himself. Woodrow Wilson didn't believe in the balance of power. He called that constitutional witchcraft. He did 1,800 of them by himself.
Woodrow Wilson.
Franklin
The
Roosevelt.
guy who brought you the income tax, right?
A lot of other things I don't like.
Sounds like he had some questionable judgment.
Franklin Roosevelt served longer than anybody else, but he also did close to 4,000 of them. So, to me, executive orders shift the balance, and they are very, very worrisome.
It's
the
draining some of the
legislature.
power that should maybe reside. Really, I guess
the
in the
legislative
legislature, it's legislative.
The legislative branch has failed in its responsibility, part of which is our rolling votes has failed in our responsibility. The filibuster in the Senate, I'm sorry, it's the wrong thing to do. I know our senators love it, but I could go into a monologue on that one too.
Yeah.
It's wrong.
Yeah.
It has caused a glitch in the legislative system. Judicial judges who make too many activist judges who decide that if the legislative and legislative and executive branches in their mind has failed, they're supposed to step in and solve the problem. That's another reason why I want to go down there. Is in Utah right now we have a judiciary that is out of step and out of balance, and they have made some really, really bad decisions, especially in the area of redistricting. So if those are out of balance, people's rights are out of balance. So keeping that balance is important to me. As a congressman, I wanted to lose power and give more of it to the states. Keeping that balance was important to me.
Right.
So that's where my civic values rest.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's fair, I think, right? So morally, right, your upbringing and your value system is going to overlap into the politics. But at the same time, there are many things that are political that aren't particularly moral. It's just, here's the system I believe in, the way that it should work as intended, or maybe in some amendments, maybe been, I don't know if improves the right word, but then based upon that system and that shared responsibility, I can work within that system. And that those morals would be more determined by what is my job as a representative? What should it be?
Yeah.
How much am I keeping the president in check from taking power from the legislature or from the Supreme Court bench? Does that sound about right?
Yeah. I would be considered conservative, but I would be considered a constitutional conservative. There are financial conservatives, there are social conservatives, there are cultural conservatives, there are conservatives who just don't want to change anything, libertarian conservatives. I probably would be in favor of more changes than some of those others, but only if it fits what I believe is the constitutional principles upon which the government's based to protect individual rights of people.
Okay, so I remember from either one of my college classes or maybe even high school talking about what conservative means, right? You're trying to conserve something, hold on to something the way that it is. Some people look to the past and be like, we just want to go back to the way it was in the past. You're saying, I don't know that I care what happened in the past, except for maybe it was more constitutional. And really that's the guiding star is, how are we doing relative to what the Constitution says we should and shouldn't be doing?
That's the way I view the way government ought to be.
Okay.
I actually think that's what John Adams' quote was about. You know, it was easy back then. When in the Declaration that talks about life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, happiness did not mean being jovial or smiling a lot. To Washington and Adams and the others, happiness meant fulfilling a civic responsibility with dignity and honor. So the pursuit of happiness was, did you do what your civic responsibility was? If you did and did it honorably, then you're happy.
Really?
Not ha-ha happy.
Yeah, that's funny. I do remember that part from the first part of the book that I did really like, I remember is talking about how words have meaning and how those things have changed. And I need to maybe go back and do some research because I hear what you're saying, but that definition of happiness is so far removed from how we use it today that there's maybe another term we would use that honor or accountability or something. But
well, and in the Fifth Amendment and the rest of the Constitution, it doesn't use happiness. It uses life, liberty, and pursuit of property, and that's what John Locke did. But once again, property to John Locke and the others was not just your house and your land. Property also was an intellectual property and a moral property you had that needed to be maintained. So the idea of doing something with distinction and honor was really important to all those people. And I think for anyone who serves in any legislative body or executive body, to do something with honor, to do the right thing for the right reason, I think is extremely important.
So it sounds like, as you're speaking, a thought came to me that oftentimes this process of governance, of legislating, is less the ideal, this constitutional ideal that we have in our mind. And it sounds like it's often, I think I say often, some representatives view it more as a chess match, as far as having like the guy you said who was able to take the funds that were supposed to go to Hill Air Force Base, like, well, hey, you know what, I captured your pawn, you know, better luck next time, kind of a thing. Or the filibuster is like, well, I don't know if I agree with it, but you know, my knight can actually move here, and them's the rules, take it or leave it. Is that what's the solution to that? What is, I guess, getting into, maybe we'll just get into this idea of I guess what I'm saying is I think that it has something to do with having a moral and religious people that can anchor to that. But I don't know. I suspect you've thought deeply about this, so I'd like to hear your thoughts.
No, it is. And it's that experience I had when Norm Bangerter was Speaker of the House, when he said, just go out and do the right thing, and everything else will take care of itself. You don't have assigned seats in Congress, but there is, in our row, there were about six or eight guys that always sat there together regardless.
Yeah,
we
buddies.
became friends, yeah.
Yeah.
And we called one the Squish because he came from a very, very liberal district in Seattle. And he was always worried about how his votes would be considered in Seattle. Now, we didn't give him a whole lot of crap because he voted with us for organization purposes.
Yeah.
So if he voted wrong on all these others, well, okay, we can overcome that. If it was back there today and you got like a 1-seat majority, that may have been different.
Yeah, you might have.
But it was okay. But I worried about him because he was so concerned with what his constituents thought. He gave himself ulcers. Just worrying about, was he doing the thing that would be popular back then? Yeah. I think if
Rob, I might not see you next year if my constituents aren't happy with how I vote.
Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
But if you did just do what you think is the right thing to do, if your constituents don't bring you back, so what? If you did the right thing, and if you do the right thing most of the time, especially if you have a body of 400 people trying to do the right thing. But when I was Speaker of the House, there were 75 members of the House in Utah.
Okay.
Most of those would give the shirt off their back for the state of Utah, which, if you think about it, you probably want to poke your mind's eye out. But there were 3 who I said, okay, every time they submitted an expense account for their work, I told staff, double check it. There were 3 that I thought were in it for themselves, not necessarily for the state.
Out of the 75, 3.
That's pretty good odds.
Right.
I'd take that any day.
They're not swinging any votes.
No. And
at least in Utah.
Yeah. And so really, if you do what you think is the right thing to do, I do believe that over the long run, everything will work out. If you're trying to make your constituents happy by either succumbing to their intellect or will, or trying to come up with all sorts of programs of free stuff to send out to them, that's when I think the country starts falling apart and the government starts going deeper and deeper into debt without the ability of actually maintaining something where you start making decisions based on what you think is the popular thing to do, not what you think is the best thing to help the country doing. And I see that on the national level today, where Trump is making a lot of decisions by executive orders, but the legislature is not doing their job. And almost every order he has is automatically going to have an injunction put by some federal judge. Before the 1960s, there was no such thing as a judge making an injunction against a policy that affected the entire state. They did it for a person. The law would not affect a person. That was the injunction. Now judges are just simply saying, you can't do it. And even if Congress passes the big, beautiful bill and the president signs it and it bans funding for Planned Parenthood, there is still a judge in Massachusetts that will say, all right, that's going to be an injunction against actually enforcing that because I think Planned Parenthood was expecting the money and therefore it's unconstitutional. I'm sorry. There is too much frustration on the national level today of people who I think are trying to do things that they think is the nice thing for ulterior motives as opposed to the right thing to do, because that is how we will best save individual rights of people.
The nice thing for ulterior motives. I'm trying to chew on that. What do you mean by that? Sorry. The people that will do nice. So are you talking about like these judges who would do? What do you mean by that? I guess.
Well, if I were a legislator and I were asked to start a program for somebody, do I expect to get largesse back from them? Do I expect to get their gratitude in the terms of votes because I voted to give them money? Now, let me try and do it this way. As part of the Conservative Caucus, of which I was part, I was chairman of the 10th Amendment. 10th Amendment of the Constitution says that everything that's not given to the federal government is reserved to the states. My job was to go on the floor and plead the 10th Amendment.
For anything possible?
When we thought it was being violated.
Okay.
So we had a very conservative, good Republican from Tennessee who loved PE. And he went in there and we were going to reauthorize No Child Left Behind, which is something, it was a terrible thing to do anyway. But he wanted to make a new mandate under No Child Left Behind that there would be mandatory PE classes in every school. And it would be mandated from Congress. All right. And so I went on the floor to plead the 10th.
Okay.
And I said, there's nothing wrong with PE classes.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with having kids going out and exercising. There's nothing wrong with forcing them to go out and run or with the cattle prod or whatever you want to do. Right. There's nothing wrong with that.
What did we do in Tennessee?
There's nothing wrong. But what is wrong is to do it on the national level. That is a decision that should be done by a school board. With a PE teacher that's involved in the process so that you actually have a good program.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with this except that we are the wrong people to do that.
Right.
So that's what I mean about doing the right thing for the right reason.
Gotcha. That makes sense. As you spoke, it reminded me of I don't know if you saw the Truth and Treason movie that came out not too long ago about Helmut Hubner. Really good. But the tagline was like, do what is right, let the consequence follow. And he was put to death because he was defying Hitler. And so I was like, I like that. I can get behind that.
I have seen that movie. Yes. That is
it's a stellar movie. So thank you. I appreciate those thoughts. Let's see here. So I feel like we've gotten through your political philosophy here. So what concerns, and maybe we've addressed some of these, but give you a chance to go into it a little bit more detail, is there's a number of things going on here in Utah. So what are your thoughts on Prop 4 redistricting?
That's another reason why I'd like to go back there, because this is an example of where the courts, I think, have abused their power and have harmed the state. And with the redistricting map that was done by the one judge, it's not only changing the process of policies in Utah, but it's harming our delegation in Washington. So I have been involved in a whole lot of redistricting issues. For 2020, I was put on the Independent Redistricting Council that the supposedly was produced by Proposition 4 and was the basis of the lawsuit. The Utah Constitution says that the district lines will be drawn by the legislature, and it also says that people have a right to do initiatives. This was an initiative, not a constitutional measure. It was a statutory initiative that creates an independent redistricting council.
Right, independent.
Yeah. Which, first of all, they realized violated this part of the Constitution. But so they made it to an advisory body instead. Now, there were three problems with that group, that Prop 4 Independent Redistricting Commission. One was representation. So there were 7 people on it. One from Cache. I was from Box Elder. One was from Davis. Those were the three Republicans. All three Democrats were from Salt Lake, the east side of Salt Lake, and they had ulterior motives. There was nobody there that represented Southern Utah or Eastern or Uinta Basin or Weber or Twilla.
Which likely would have probably drowned out some of the Utah County.
Yeah, if the legislature is there, every part of this county every part of the state is represented. There is no accountability on this board. We made our decisions and then we disappeared. A legislator has to stand up publicly, vote, and defend that vote to their constituents. And I'm going to say...
And were these 7 people, were they actually already elected delegate? Like, they were already elected officials? Or
Appointed.
So it could have been anybody from Utah.
Well, the Speaker, the President of the Senate, Majority Leader, Minority Leader of the House and the Senate got to appoint somebody, and the governor got to appoint somebody. That's where the 7 came from.
Okay.
So they're all appointed. Because we didn't represent the area, we made our decisions in basic ignorance. We were sitting there going, Spanish Fork has more the people than one House seat would get. Where should we divide it? It was like, I don't know. Fortunately,
I'll take it.
One of the interns we happened to have working for us was from Spanish Fork, and he told us what the impact of the freeway was. So he said, based on his decision, well, let's do it that way. We then found out that's what the legislature did 10 years earlier. But for us, we're making decisions in ignorance. We had no accountability. We were not we had nothing to back it up. We just did it. And it was politically motivated. Terribly. Now, the legislature is politically motivated, but at least that's up front. You know about it.
Right. Yeah, we're not pretending we're not. There's something there.
So I thought the decisions that we came up with were horrible. Here's what the Utah Supreme Court did. Some groups sued. They didn't sue on the school district boundaries that we came up with or legislative boundaries, only on congressional boundaries, because I think that's the ulterior motive. So they sued, and the state Supreme Court said, yeah, the legislature makes the laws, but this amendment initiative also passed, and we're going to say this initiative takes precedence over this part of the constitutional language.
Constitution, not just some law that was passed, but the Constitution of the state of Utah.
Yeah, so the Constitution says you can have initiatives, but it doesn't say that the legislature can't change what the initiative does. They said, no, you can't. If it's a fundamental change, legislature can only change it if there is a compelling state interest as defined by the courts. All of a sudden, the courts have taken over a enormous amount of power. Then you had one judge who decided to say, I'm going to throw out everything the legislature drew, and I will impose what the new districts will look like, only on Congress, not on the legislature, because the plaintiffs didn't really care about the legislature and the school board. They wanted to guarantee a Democrat congressman would be elected in Utah.
They got one red seat in.
And one federal judge obliged them in doing that. And what really irked me more than anything is I was the one that, well, I won't go into that. Naming the seat in Salt Lake as District 1 instead of us up here, that really irks me. And it shows an attitude and an arrogance that should not be there. But here's the other thing that's wrong. We had for 20 years an urban-only district in Utah. So we had one congressman back there, urban only. The others were urban and rural.
Okay.
They didn't get along. It was a horrible 20 years. That one urban did not assist in one way, shape, or form in helping rural issues.
Which is most of Utah.
When I went back there, we had 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat. And the Democrat was Jim Matheson, whose most common phrase was, I hope we're all on the same page. And we usually were.
Okay.
Because he had urban and rural, and the rest of us had urban and rural. Okay. So we were united on urban issues, and we were united on rural issues. Even the Democrat was with us.
Yeah, because we're still all representing Utah and what's best for Utah.
And that's the important. That's what the judge destroyed, hurt Utah. We only have 4 representatives back in Washington. We cannot afford to be divided. And if there is a urban representative back there only doing urban issues and caring about urban issues, we are divided. You have diluted Utah's strength in Washington. You have harmed them. Now, when I was on that independent commission, that's what I was arguing about. You have to have urban and rural in all of them. And the ones from Salt Lake, the representatives on that commission, didn't want that at all. That's why I resigned in frustration, because I knew they were going to send maps that were just urban only.
Because that's the only, just, am I understand right? That would be the way that they get the Democrat seat.
Yes.
Okay.
That doesn't have to be that way. Those 20 years where we had an urban only district, actually 5 were Republicans and 3 were Democrats. But the Republicans weren't that much better than the Democrats on rural issues. So it is having a balanced representation that is significant. That's what the judge screwed up by making the decisions herself. Plus the fact judges should not be drawing maps. I don't care. The Constitution of Utah says the legislature draws the maps. And it can't be overturned by a judge that simply says, well, I don't think that's good. I don't like that.
Right.
So this Proposition 4 issue that they're dealing with in the legislature, I would have joined them in voting for an appeal to the state Supreme Court. I would have joined them in adding more seats on the state Supreme Court.
That was one of the things I wanted to get into as well, which I think Glenn Beck kind of railed against it a little bit, which I usually enjoy listening to Glenn Beck. The concern, of, I don't know, I guess my mind goes back to FDR, court packing. I don't know if court packing is the right word. That's what we'll use though, but of essentially appointing a number of more, 3 more judges to the Supreme, 2 more Supreme Court judges
in Utah. They'll go from 5 to 7.
5 to 7. And so I can't remember what Glenn Beck said about it being this kind of huge issue. What are you doing, Utah? But what's your, you said you would have supported or would support that, or would have had you been in Congress, Utah. Do you call it Congress? Utah, no, the state legislature. Okay. The legislature, the House of Representatives. Why would you have supported that outside of this particular redistricting issue? Or maybe this is the whole reason.
No, there are a whole lot of issues that I think the judges are appointed by the governor, but the governor only picks from a group that are given to him by a nominating commission. If you change the nominating commission, you get a different kind of three picks going to the governor for a selection process.
Who chooses the nominating?
Well, the legislature has changed that in last session. Before that time, it was done basically through the Judicial Council. So, under Huntsman and Herbert and Cox, there were fairly activist type of judges being presented to the governor from whom to choose.
And he had to choose.
With the new system, there'll be a wider variety of judges being nominated to the governor from whom he can choose to nominate.
Okay.
So there's a convoluted process.
Okay. And it seems suboptimal based on what we've gotten out of it.
Adding 2 more seats would allow the new process that we're using for coming up with nominees, giving to the governor a chance. Well, let's just say the first replacement they did on the state Supreme Court under this new system was a person who had applied 3 different times and had not been sent to the governor. This time he was sent to the governor and was appointed.
Okay.
And I think he is not an activist judge. He'll do a good job.
Okay.
So giving 2 more that are not activists would help. It would also help just in the maintenance of the backlog of court cases that they have to deal with. It's not going to add more time to the process. It will allow them to do more as a Supreme Court. So our 5-member Supreme Court really is amazingly small as far as state Supreme Courts goes.
Okay. And is that, so one of the things that I've heard on this is that the backlog has to do with more, I don't know how the right term, the further down judges. How much influence or power over that issue does the new 2 Supreme Court justices actually have over that?
I don't know. They may. I don't know if it will change it at all.
Okay.
It may. It may free up that. But I also think it can bring some more balance to the judiciary in the state of Utah. And there's been several decisions that were done about the same time that the courts did that thing on Proposition 4. They also did some other decisions that on education funding. They did some decisions on abortion funding that I think were highly suspect.
Fair enough. And so that's when you say activist judges, you're saying what comes to mind is those who are trying to legislate from the bench, and less what the Constitution designed Supreme Court judges for, and more like, I have this pet project that I'd like, I'm not particularly unbiased on. Is that?
That's fair.
Okay.
And it's, I could say liberal judges, which would be more pejorative than activist judges. But there was a Harvard professor who called them, I can't remember what she called them. She called them people that were ruling from the heart. Starting in the 1950s, there was a concept that came out of the courts that simply said, and it was taught in law schools, that if a judge thinks the executive and legislative branch have failed, they have an obligation to break new ground and solve the problem, not adjudicate based on what the verbiage is, but to solve the problem. That's my definition of an activist judge. And I don't want a judge who tries to solve the problem as opposed to just adjudicating what should be done according to the verbiage that's already in law and in the Constitution.
Right. You have a job description. Follow that. If you have an issue with that, we'll vote for your legislator because that's their job.
Well, and
run for a legislator position.
Well, I do believe that. I do believe most decisions should be done by legislatures which are elected by the people, and in conjunction with the governor, that's more of an administrator than a legislator. And I think most of the things in Utah are in pretty good balance. The judiciary in the last few years in Utah, I think, has been out of balance.
Okay.
And I would like to bring that back into balance.
Okay. And the 2 additional judges as a way to pull that back.
And Prop 4, if you're ever going to have some kind of independent panel to redistrict, solve the problem of representation so they at least know what they're doing when they're making those decisions, solve the problem of accountability so they just can't do it and then not go hide. They have to have some accountability, and see if you can solve the politics issue that was obviously there. I don't know if you can ever do that, but if the other 2, then I'd be happy. So if
work
ever,
together in good faith, then maybe.
I don't know how you do that, but if ever again you decide to try another kind of redistricting, whether it's imposed by the courts or voted by the legislature, solve those problems, because that was a problem that I experienced in that role.
Yeah, and that's particular experience that you have having to have dealt with what you mentioned, the urban versus rural representatives. As far as the Prop 4 redistricting goes, I think I've heard of petitions to repeal it. Maybe. Do you know we know what the problem is? I think you've spoken pretty well about what the problem is, and the solution. It sounds like, at least in part, was the judges. Do you think it should be repealed altogether? Or do you think that we need to just figure out the language so we know, like you said, fixing the problem, legislator needs to clarify who's going to be on this nonpartisan committee?
I would repeal it just so that you can start fresh.
Okay.
And Proposition 4 is easily the most controversial initiative that ever passed in Utah. It did pass in Utah, but only by less than 7,000 votes. That's the closest anyone has ever passed. And of those 7,000, it passed in Salt Lake and Summit County by, I think, 68,000 votes. So the bulk of the state voted against it. It was really, there were 4 counties that voted for it, and it was basically Salt Lake and Summit that passed it. So I think, and there's some social reasons on why that actually happened in that particular election cycle. But I think the best thing to do would be just to repeal the entire thing. And then if you're going to do it, start over again and build from scratch and come up with a process that will not have those accountability, representation, and political intrigue problems with it.
Do you think that there would be enough votes in the legislature to be like, we're going to repeal this altogether?
Yes.
Okay. And then if actually, somebody wanted...
That's unfair. I don't know for sure.
You don't know? Okay.
I think so. I would hope so, but...
We don't know. And then if somebody from, call it Salt Lake County, was like, no, we really should have something like this. Let's come up with a better version of Proposition 4.
And yes.
That can meet some of these other issues that we saw pop up.
Yeah. Now, many states have independent commissions. They all have problems with them. The states that have the fewest problems with independent commissions are the ones that usually protect incumbents' seats. And that was something that this Proposition 4 was specifically to avoid. We were told that we could not use political data of any kind at any time.
And is it independent?
Some of the maps that we were given, though, did use political data by outside groups.
So independent would be in reference to independent from the legislature. Is that what
that's what they meant by
adjective would? Okay.
But 3 were supposed to be elected by Republicans, 3 were elected by Democrats. That's pretty partisan organization from the very get-go.
Right. Yeah. That's if you're gonna have it be nonpartisan. I don't know how you get around that, like you said, but you should probably try to do something.
and it never was considered to be a nonpartisan.
Okay, that was never part of the charter.
Well, actually, people said that, but if you're selected, if you have to have 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats together, on a 7-man commission,
that's de facto.
That's going to be partisan. Yeah.
Yeah. So, looking at some of the things, other things that I think are on people's minds with what's going on in Utah. I know there's been talk, I think specifically talked with Representative Peterson about tax cuts, trying to help the regular man out with their own deal, right? Giving more back to the individual. Is there anything that you are aware of that's going on either now or that you would be looking at? I guess we'll just give you the floor on how you view tax cuts, what we should be doing, and then relative also or tied to that, spending cuts.
Spending cuts, there's nothing wrong with the tax cut, especially if you're dealing with property tax, which is the most unfair tax. That's the one which can rise whether you have the ability to pay or not.
It's basically unrealized gains, right?
Spending cuts are obviously should be used in lieu before you ever do any kind of tax increases. Then spending cuts have to be there. All right, now here's where I will get in trouble with the rest of my friends in the legislature.
Okay.
Because I know why they do this and I know how they do it. Utah makes a great deal of noise about how we have a balanced budget, and we do. I got tired of several times of the governor coming back to Washington and saying, "We can balance our budget in Utah. Why can't you do it back here?" And I thought, shut up. Because the reason Utah can balance its budget is it rounds off its budget with federal money. There are a whole lot of programs in Utah in which we put federal money into the program so the legislature doesn't have to raise its taxes, can keep funding the program and having it running with more money than the state actually has.
Yeah, other states and their taxes are, if I'm using this right, subsidizing our ability to do so.
Well, and that's the argument. I mean, people will say if we don't take the federal money, then some other state will get it and we're out in the cold.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Because the problem is that's why.
What is it? Subsidies are a heck of a drug.
Yes. No, that's why the Washington budget is never in balance, because we keep spending it on all sorts of stuff, and the states keep sucking it up to balance off their budgets, and they are very, very proud about how they can balance the budget. But it's balanced on it also,
It sounds like some of our federal taxes are state taxes with extra steps.
Yes. Yes, they are. And also it changes the priorities of the state. So when I was, once again, a long time ago in the legislature, Carl Perkins money, they had a requirement that came from the federal government that in order to get Carl Perkins money, you had to buy a certain kind of computer. Now, I'm sorry, this is when IBM was still big and computers took up an entire room and they were really expensive. And the state of Utah didn't want it, and we didn't need it, and we didn't use it, but we bought it anyway because that was the only way we could get Carl Perkins money, which would be there to subsidize shop classes and computer classes and home ec classes.
Some portion of that goes to this computer, and then the rest of it we can use how we want, kind of a thing.
Yeah. But we had a computer, and it stayed in the room, and no one ever used it. And eventually you got rid of it.
And we subsidized the company that was able to.
That was a long time ago, but it was a classic reason of how I can point out the bridge down in Sandy that was built because there was a 10-to-1 federal match that came to it.
Yes.
That's why we made that decision.
I mean, at that match, you'd be a fool not to build the bridge.
Well, that's what we thought. But at some point, what Utah needs to do is to cut the ties with the federal government. And there are some ways that instead of maybe doing a tax cut, I'm not talking about increases, but instead of doing a tax cut, why don't we buy out the federal government with that money and then take priority so that we get to decide what the priorities in Utah will be. There's also something called creeping conditionalism, which means when you take federal money, it tends to increase how much you have to take. And it tends to increase how many requirements and regulations and strings are attached to it. And every state has to deal with that takes federal money. Now, I know the argument will be, if we don't take it, California will. I don't know if that justifies us taking it.
Is there, it kind of does, but I know what you mean. What comes to mind is I was listening to Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover, and he talks about this concept of when you're out of debt, you have freedom to make other choices, right? If all of a sudden your costs go down because you don't owe, $1,500 on your house every month, well, maybe you don't have to have that job that you don't love, and you could take a different job that pays less, and you have that freedom to do that. And it seems like that principle of not having a master, not owing a debt, and in this case, we owe a debt to the federal government. I do feel that pull of like, well, if we don't get it, California does. I don't know if you get rid of that. Is there a case or a means that we have to, if we're not going to take this money, then we are going to stand up against the federal government pulling it from our clutches? As far as the people who make it, why should the government tax Utahns at 30% of their income if none of that's coming back, or a fraction of it's coming back that used to, because we decided to stand up? Is there a mechanism that we would have to stand on if we decided, you know what, we're going to stop suckling the federal governments, and we're going to instead, maybe some of that, maybe Utah, taxes income at a little higher rate, and then the federal government doesn't? I don't know what mechanism we could use to do that.
There are a couple of bills that have been proposed in the House. One actually even passed the House and failed the Senate on the national level.
Okay.
That would give states some kind of ability of, if they're not taking the federal government, they could withdraw or lower the kinds of taxes that they're sending to the federal government.
Okay.
You could do that by law. That hasn't ever passed. Right now, what Utah would have to do is simply saying, okay, we're going to bite the bullet, and we're not going to take the requirements and the strings that are attached. We will make our own priorities and our own decisions, and we'll fund it ourselves. And that would be a tough decision to make.
If we took 3-5 years and said we haven't taken, a dime, or maybe we've taken, 100th of what we used to take from the federal government coming back to Utah, we're going to put into our into our law or to our constitution that the federal government can't demand over X amount. Is that, I don't want to tread on, I don't know if treason's the right word, but I think that our founding fathers would probably agree with that sentiment. I don't know how you get there without watering the tree of liberty, as it were.
No, they'd agree with this, and they'd also agree that it's probably unconstitutional. The states cannot mandate what the federal government does, and doing that kind of either or because of this, there's a problem with that.
Okay.
But I still think it's worth at least exploring, if not attempting, to try and cut the strings with the federal government. And I hate to say this, for the federal government, that's the only way they're actually going to cut ever. It's not that the federal
we say
government,
we're done, and now it doesn't have to flow to Utah as much.
The federal government, there are a lot of people that say, well, let's just get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse. There's not enough waste, fraud, and abuse to do that. If the federal government's ever going to control itself, it has to realize that it's not spending too much money. It's spending money on too many things. And that's one of the reasons why when Trump starts cutting programs and then the courts say, you can't do that, that's a problem, because the only way the federal government, the national government, will get control of its spending is if you cut programs. You have to do that. You have to do that. And for a judge to say, well, no, we're not going to let you do that.
No, we've grown accustomed to a certain standard of living, so you are required now to fund that.
And for the legislative branch, who's not going to work in conjunction with the president to do that, which is not. So that's their problem. They've got a lot of, if I was back there, I'd still be yelling at a whole lot of people on a whole lot of different levels. But what I'm saying for the state simply can't dictate that situation. The state just got to make a decision on their own. Are we going to be in charge of our own future or not? Are we going to let the federal government buy it? Because if we take 10% federal money and 90% state, the 10% will put requirements on the 90. So it's a matter of Utah deciding, are we going to be responsible for ourselves or not? Or are we just going to keep accepting more and more federal government because it helps round out our budgets? And we can give a lot of services for fewer taxes and look really cool doing so. It's an issue that has to be addressed. It's an issue that I would try and push. At least, if you're going to take the money, at least know what you're doing ahead of time and be honest with the state and say, okay, we'll take federal money because...
Okay. So that's something that you would do in Congress, be like, hey, look, let's look at some bills maybe. I don't know, pull your team together and be like, what can we put forward and say, Utah's not going to take X, Y, and Z. And maybe that's 3 things out of 100, but it's a step in the right direction. Or maybe we winnow it down over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, it's a step in the right direction, but obviously understanding that until you take all of it, X, Y, and Z is only going to be the first step.
Yeah. You have to have somebody to carry the torch after you're gone. It has to be a shift in the mindset.
And there's some legitimate issues that are involved here. Like I said, the canal that we have from Pineview coming up to Box Elder County, that's owned by the federal government, but we have to maintain it. Well, we have to maintain it. The federal government really should probably do the maintaining if they're going to have the ultimate ownership of it.
Right. Or we can take ownership of it, and then we don't have to be dependent on whether they're going to maintain it or not.
There was a time when I was in Congress and Weber County did talk about just taking over control of Pineview altogether from the federal, and I was more than happy to try and help them with that. But it didn't ever go anywhere.
There wasn't enough steam behind it, or?
Well, the county didn't really want to go all the way through with it once they realized there would be some costs that would be involved in it. But it happens everywhere. Back in Washington, D.C., the old Robert F. Kennedy Stadium that used to be for the was then the Redskins and the Washington Senators is still there. It's still in Washington. And Washington city would like to get control of that land, even though it's national land owned by the Park Service. And I said, fine. They said, we want to work together so that we can control how we can redevelop that land. And I said, fine, let me work with you. Why don't we just pass a law to give you back the land?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, no, we don't want the land. We just want to be able to control what's done with it. And I said, just take the land, then you can control what's done with the land. It's your land.
Yeah.
They could never, they couldn't put their mind around the idea that that a local government could actually control and manage land by themselves. For some reason, the federal government is the only one that can do that. That's mind-boggling to me.
And that was the assumption there that they were getting some sort of funding to manage it or to have that there and the federal government own it versus them?
They would want the federal government, because it was federal land, to give them money to do the zoning requirements that they wanted to put into effect.
Oh, geez. It's even worse than that. It's we want to control this, and we want you to pay us for the privilege of doing so.
Unfortunately, that happens in a lot of different places, especially where the federal government is the absentee landowner.
So, anything else that you think? I guess anything else you want to discuss? I think we find a good place here, unless you've got something else you want to go over.
I don't know. I think I've probably effectively bored you, and I know I bored your listeners.
Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I do, again, appreciate you being on the podcast. It's been a pleasure. And let's see here. Oh, I just want to also thank Maze Technology here in Brigham City. They've let us use their conference rooms multiple times, Matt Hutching. So I just want to do a shout out. Appreciate that. And again, thanks for being on.
No, thank you.
Thank you for listening. You can find more information on our Facebook page. And if you found this helpful, please leave a like and a comment. Remember, get informed, get involved, and turn to the Lord in all things. Cheers.